Welcome to the 9th Urban Dialogue, and we're delighted to host the Wellbeing Economy team. We can call you that by now, I guess, for this dialogue, which is a panel discussion titled Pathways Towards a Wellbeing Economy in European Cities. And Nicky, Pouw, Joscha, Betke, and Hebe Verest are co-hosting the dialogue, and Joscha Betke is going to lead the panel and coordinate, and he will also introduce all the panelists today. So Joscha, I hand over to you, and we look very much forward to this debate. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Maria, and also thank you for the Center for Urban Studies for hosting this event today. As you said, my name is Joscha Betke. I'm going to chair this panel debate. And with our amazing panelists, we are going to exchange some knowledge and experiences on redirecting the urban towards well-being instead of GDP growth. Civil society groups and intergovernmental organizations, for example, the OECD and the Council of the European Union, already embraced the idea that we need to move towards an economy that places the inclusive and sustainable improvement of its citizens' well-being at its heart. But how do we get there, and what challenges do we face? This is going to be the topic of today's discussion, which we're going to go along 4 to 5 discussion questions, and then the remaining 10 minutes we will leave for the audience, for everyone to also have the opportunity to ask some questions. And yeah, by the way, you can obviously switch off your camera, but for everyone, I would like to invite you as well to switch it on, so it will be a more lively experience for everyone who's joining. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists, and I'm very happy that you could all make it this evening. We're going to start off by Franz Biekmann. He's the strategic advisor for the city of Amsterdam and the director of the Fear the City program, which basically aims to explore opportunities to facilitate change from the city first. Next up, we have Eveline Cox van Aalsborg, also strategic policy advisor, but for the municipality of The Hague. And she specialized in the district development. Good evening. Next up is Tobias Dauer, a consultant for the economy for the common good, or Gemeinwohlökonomie, as we say in Germany. He's from Münster, where this topic actually has become part of the new coalition agreement already. So at this point, congratulations, Tobias, for this. Our next person is Michael Berghier. He's the senior analyst at the Happiness Research Institute in Copenhagen, and he's focusing on measuring well-being and happiness. And he has also recently published a report on the well-being economy for the Nordic Council of Ministers. Hello. And I'm also very happy to introduce to you Catherine Trebeck. She's the co-founder and senior strategic advisor for the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, living in Glasgow, Scotland. For everyone, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is promoting the idea of a well-being economy internationally. And for example, also brought the leaders of Scotland, New Zealand, Iceland, Wales, and also Finland together on this topic. So very nice. And last but not least, Nicky Pouw, the Associate Professor of Economics of Wellbeing at the University of Amsterdam. She published a book, Wellbeing Economics, last year, and is currently working on a wellbeing dashboard, a research project. But before going into the technical details and to the discussion, I would like to ask you, Nicky, to quickly introduce the concept that we're talking about today, wellbeing economics.
Thank you, Joscha, for your introduction, and I promise to be very short. Wellbeing economy, for those of you who are not so familiar with it, is about finding an alternative to the neoliberal paradigm. There is an increasing awareness that we need a new narrative about the economy. And instead of asking what we can do for the economy, we would like to pose the question, what can the economy do for us and for nature? Therefore, we think the economy should refocus on human well-being instead of GDP growth, whereby, this notion of a social human being that is interconnected to social and also natural environment needs to be central. And this requires new indicators, new measures, but that alone is of course not enough. And in well-being economy, we try to work with a more integrated framework which accounts for social, economic and ecological trade-offs as what we call in economics first-order effects in economic modeling instead of second-order or externalities. And this also requires different ways of work. The concept of well-being is a multidimensional concept. You will also hear that from the panelists and their work. It's about material aspects of living well together, but also the social, relational, and the subjective side of that. So in economics, it is my proposition also to create more room for qualitative data, qualitative research, for understanding the economy better. So that is just my very short introduction on well-being economy. Over to you, Joscha.
Well, thank you very much for that informative introduction to the concept, Nicky. So let's hit it off. I'm going to ask you first, Franz. In your position as a strategic advisor in Amsterdam and the director of the Fearless City program, in your work, what has been and what are the strategies for the urban economies that you utilize to pursue a economy of well-being? What have been the challenges and your personal experiences in this?
That's a very broad question. First, I have to say that my program and the alderman I work for is not the alderman of economic affairs. So officially, we don't have an economic policy in Amsterdam that is anything else than it was before, when there was a quite neoliberal right-wing government in charge. And now there's a more progressive coalition. So we work from the democratization side of everything. So what we try to do, we work as a think tank within the city government, but also in the city in Amsterdam, and we try to push for alternative ideas in the direction of well-being. But there are, I remember reading an interview of Catherine in a Dutch magazine where she talked about the nieces and cousins of the well-being economy. So there's degrowth, there's the commons economy, there's cooperative economy, social solidarity economy, all kinds of alternative ideas that we try to get together. We organized an online conference, an online forum, the Cities for Change Forum, from March to June, online, with 60 events, with 2,700 people, with 130 organizations, all looking at this alternative economy and how, at the city level, it was European, how to get together all these ideas, because I think, at least in Amsterdam, the movement for it is still quite fragmented, although there is a momentum. 4 years ago, when this coalition started, there was no talk about an alternative economy. There was a lot of talk about sustainability, climate, inequality, social aspects, but not about moving towards another economy. And now that's in the center of the discussion. So I hope that for the next elections, which will be in March in Amsterdam, the economy and alternative economy will be the headline, will be the focus that they will direct on, and that we will have a new coalition agreement like in Münster, which focuses on well-being economy as the most important thing to do. That having said, we did a lot of things. We introduced new ideas like community wealth building. We did pilot projects in the southeast of Amsterdam and other parts of the city on community wealth building. I could explain about it, but I don't do it at the moment. But for me, it's part of a strategy towards another economy. We asked Nicky and Hebe and you now and Jennifer to develop for us a city-focused dashboard for the well-being economy. currently, you know, we are talking with all kinds of departments within the city, because there's a lot of monitoring going on within the city on different aspects of the economy, how to get this all together and how to use this dashboard as a central frame for that. And everybody may know that Amsterdam was the first city that declared itself a donut city, or at least that they wanted to strive for a donut strategy towards the donut economy. And that's still a big challenge, I would say, to be a little bit critical to my own bosses within this city government. At the moment, it's mainly focusing on the circular economy, so on part of the ecological ceiling of the donut, not so much on the social fundaments, and even less so about on an alternative economy, which is, in my idea, is the essential aspect of the Kate Raworth book on donut economy. So there's still a long way to go, but I think there is a momentum, there is a possibility now to move forward. And the main thing also, that's also what we talk about with you, is how to, let's say, how to apply all these theoretical frameworks and ideas and towards practical policies. There's still a large gap between the ideas and how to do it in practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. I see you have a big portfolio of activities and generally in Amsterdam that is going on. And I see a challenge in combining them all under the same umbrella topic of a well-being economy, and that might be an opportunity for the future. Evelyn, how are things looking in The Hague at the moment, considering strategies for a well-being economy or similar initiatives like the donut and circular economy?
Those are all concepts we are thinking about, and well, we need think tanks to look at it deeply. But the projects I work on are more practical. When you see it from the perspective of citizens, there's no difference between physical environment and social and economic policies for a citizen. So as a policymaker and project manager, well, I have a focus on the physical environment. That's my domain of my expertise. But I realize my plans and solutions have a social impact. And that's what we are looking for. How can we find out what impact, what social impact come with physical projects? And for example, in the city center, we have the Central Innovation District policy, which is about the new economy and giving room to the new economy in the city center. And we have a vision for that, which is largely a vision on the physical environment. But the main questions are questions from the city council and citizens about the social impact of the plans that are developed there. So I'm working with some inhabitants of The Hague on the social impact assessment as an instrument, as a concept to develop an instrument where you can measure social impact of physical projects. And well, from the international context, we know it, social impact assessment, for example, from mining industry or oil industry. And we try to develop this instrument in the context of the energy transition in the city of The Hague, which is quite, well, a discussion about how to measure social impact and how to make it work together with the inhabitants, with the citizens of neighborhoods and the city. So that's where I am working on with my colleagues at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for these insights. We're going to talk a little bit more about the actual measurement of impact, happiness, and well-being a little bit at a later point. But it's interesting to see that you already worked out like a social impact assessment instrument together with the citizens. Have you encountered any challenges in this process so far, or any opportunities? How do you view this process?
Well, there really are some challenges in how to organize the good discussions, and how to find out what we already know and what we need to know. So to bring together the knowledge we have within the organization, but also within the cooperations of citizens that are already active in the energy transition discussions, and bring together all the knowledge on this theme. That's well, quite a job.
Yes, I can imagine. Or good luck in the way forward there as well. I want to switch the discussion now to Tobias, who has been working on the common goods, or the economy for the common good in Germany, more specifically around Münster. It's a small town and smaller other municipalities around, if I'm correct. Could you tell me a little bit about the experience, how you managed to get the topic of the economy for the common good, that it was basically part of the political discussions there as well, and made it into the new coalition agreement, Tobias?
300,000 people is small for you. Okay. Compared to Amsterdam it is, and compared to Copenhagen too. Yes, I'm consultant, and I'm working with social and ethical transformations with companies since 20 years. And the EDG, the Economy of the Common Good, was founded 11 years ago from Christian Felber in Austria. And it sounds like it has similar target to the well-being economy, the first view. And I decided 7 years ago to try to settle this up in Münster, and we decided the most important point is to do lighthouse projects to show that it is practicable. The ECG is an corporate initiative in the origin. It was, there were about 12 companies. They said we are doing well, doing the right things, but we don't grow and we don't earn a lot of money. That's not what we want to. How can we describe this? How can we measure this? And the ECG started with it is an economical model, but the core is the matrix. It's a sheet where you can describe with a 360-degree view how to describe, or how to describe what a company is doing in questions of dignity, solidarity, sustainability, transparency, value-driven business. And so they developed a common good balance sheet. Based on this matrix, you can write a paper about 50, 60, 70 pages, and you can measure this already. And we have lots of companies who are doing this common good balance sheet. And we have an audit system to review this from external. And the first step I did in Münster was, I said, it's important not only to inform about this theory and to stay in the theory, but to show that it is possible. And I did this together with the university, and we did a project where we did a balance sheet together with the students for the seven companies in Münster. And when you have 7 companies doing this, you have a small pressure, and you have some you can show that there is something already in practice. It's not only a theory. And with this idea, I got in contact to the politicians in Münster, and we got the first council resolution, just showing that, they did this council resolution only because we had these companies. So showing that something is in practice is, for me, the most important step. It's much more important than to mobilize people. And we did this 2 times in Münster. And when you are visible as someone who knows about this stuff, knows about the ECG, they are talking to you. And so I talked to politicians, and we did workshops and informations and things like this. And the coalition agreement was a work of 7 years, but at the end now, in this year, in February, they designed an agreement which has, you need two things to make ECG happen. The one thing is, the first thing you need these companies who do this on their own accord. They like to do ethical business, and they do this also if it costs more or it's more difficult to do it, and they have they are staying worse and they have no chances to get money from the city. They do it anyway. And the next step, you have to change this. You need to change the system rules, and on the local base, you can change the rules just by several steps the city can do. One thing is that they want to do an ECG accounting of all municipal companies. This is not difficult because municipal companies always have a target which has to do with values. And they want to set up a support program for corporate accounting. They want to align public procurement and financial aid with ECG balancing. And they want to allocate the ECG criteria, for example, commercial real estate and land and these things. So you have to show your value for the well-being, for the to be the one they want to let in their buildings, stuff like this. And I don't know whether this all will happen. The first step, it's a coalition agreement, but we have this also already on states. 4 states in Germany. Germany is divided in 16 states, and 4 of them already have their coalition agreements, where they also want to help economy of the common good. So we have this not only on the local area. We have several cities already doing something like doing a balance sheet for the local companies. These are that are working. And the next thing then is to let this grow. To you get in contact to their or to the organization they want to Wirtschaftsförderung, to strengthen the companies in the city, and they get in contact to you because they read the coalition agreement. So this all fits into the next one. You need these steps. And then the organizations, the company organizations, go in contact to you. They say, hey, we want to do this too. What is this? We heard about SDGs. Are you compatible? Yes, we are compatible to SDGs. That's fantastic. We have a lot of companies who are interested in this topic. So you roll this out, and it's growing larger, like a snowball, getting larger and larger and larger. And at the moment, we are in this situation where we see that we get a lot of people contacting us because of the coalition agreement, and you can talk to banks and stuff like this. And on the other hand, you have the Green Deal on the EU, and you can discuss this topic also along the Green Deal, and can say, okay, here's coming something from top, and what do you want to do on the local area, seeing that there's some change on the EU.
Wow, thank you. I see it's a step-by-step process, which is really going on. And very interesting to see that you started at the beginning, or that was your strategy, to start with the firms first, and then have something practical in hand to really then show it to politicians, and then get the snowball rolling. I've also realized you mentioned a matrix that you were working on. Also, Evelyn talked in the context of The Hague. They have a social impact measurement in place. So we want to switch this discussion now a little bit to the monitoring and the measuring. And I want to ask you, Michael, so these strategies, what we heard now, and like different instruments for well-being, like what does this monitoring, measuring at the level of policymaking mean, and what has your role been in this?
Thank you so much, Joscha. So yeah, I think it's I'm actually very much on aligned here with Franz said. You know, we have a lot of great strategies already. Different countries are adopting well-being economy, and they are applying some really comprehensive and elaborated frameworks and indexes for that goes beyond GDP. That seems to be the common denominator across these initiatives. So recently, my colleagues and I published this report, as you mentioned, for the Nordic Council of Ministers, and it was basically a report where we investigated how these governments in the Nordic countries, but also beyond the Nordic countries, they seem to adopt it, and how they also seem to go just beyond measuring and strategy planning. And I'm, as I said, very much aligned here with Franz, because there seems to be like a gap often from what we say, where we say like it seems that many governments are good at monitoring, or at many countries we have a lot of great well-being data and evidence, and we're really good at applying, or several governments are now applying some great frameworks that are very broad and comprehensive. But then we need to go to like a solution level as well. Or an intervention level, and how that works in practice is that it often entails cost-benefit analyses. Like, so basically, if you are a policymaker and you have some budgetary restraints, and you know so much of the budget can be spent on whatever target or whatever area, perhaps guided by the framework, which is good, and then you still end up having a problem of how to pick solutions, right? So even though you know that there's a lot of budget allocated to children's health, for instance, because this framework has dictated, so you still have a problem of how to pick between alternative options, right? So there's still like, what then is the good solution? What is the cost or the well-being, well-being cost effective, or the most well-being optimal decisions relative to the cost or relative to the budget you have at hand? And that's where it gets into a kind of a paradox. We find, because from the frameworks you've been working very holistically, and we've established like a lot of indicators often and a lot of different perspectives. And then you have to go to a cost-benefit analysis, which often entails just really reducing information to a single measure of value, oftentimes, right? Because you need comparison. You need to be able to compare a solution that addresses one problem to a solution that addresses another problem, where the measures of outcome in their nature are very different, like air pollution versus children's health. So you need to kind of have some kind of common currency of impact, basically. And I think that is often the kind of counterintuitive problem here, where we've tried to establish something that's very holistic, and then all of a sudden we have to reduce information to something that is single and something that is very, very, very simplistic often. But nevertheless, it's very, very important, because or else I think we may end up being in a paralyzed situation where we have a lot of great strategies and we know to which areas to allocate resources, but we are not really good at figuring out what is then the good solution, or maybe we will then return. And that's actually also what we found in many of the case studies of the countries. They tend to have a new strategy, which means we allocate resources differently, but then when we have to pick decisions or solutions, we depend on like the conventional methods. However, there are some countries or some governments that are adopting like new approaches here. New Zealand and the Treasury in New Zealand and the Treasury in the UK have both adopted this concept called the Wellbeing Adjusted Life Years, which is the measure we at the Happiness Research Institute have also worked with for years. So of course I'm a bit biased, but I am a bit I'm very much in favor of that metric. Basically, the metric, the Wellbeing Adjusted Life Years, is relying on the measure of life satisfaction. So basically, it's saying that life satisfaction is the single measure. So it's like life satisfaction, which is a scale from 0 to 10 on how satisfied you are with your life. That should be kind of the single measure we should use to direct resources and pick decisions. And obviously that's a reduction of reality, and that's not like a perfect measure of well-being. I think everybody would agree, but we may be in a situation, or at least I would argue, that if we want to make good cost-benefit analysis, which often is required to not be in a paralyzed situation, you need to go with something, and I think it's about picking the least bad measure, or at least not let perfect be the enemy of the good here, and then actually adopt a measure like they do in the Treasury in the UK or in New Zealand, and start measuring interventions or the impact of interventions or expected impact based on the expected life satisfaction outcomes of the target groups. And also, just like a final note here, I think if more countries and also municipalities and cities do so, I think what we will also achieve is more of a common language across well-being economies, basically a way of benchmarking performance, but also sharing knowledge about evidence and impact. Because I think one of the great risks about well-being economy as a concept is it can be very diffuse, and it's like an umbrella concept, and sometimes it can be very hard to compare one well-being economy to another. But if we have some alignment, at least, on how to value impact of interventions and share that knowledge, because we speak the same language, I think we can come very far. And then we can, of course, always develop and improve the measures and challenge them. But it's also about just being practical, I think, and accepting that you cannot measure everything and account for everything in decision making. You need to reduce that information.
Well, thank you very much for your remarks, Michael. I think they were very valid, and also bringing in this a little bit more practical policy making view of what is currently the case, but basically seeing well-being economy already trying to measure different dimension. It's already getting closer than just doing that in GDP terms. But yes, it's a contentious issue, and Nicky is also working on this at the moment. Do you have something to add to this?
To a number of statements that the panelists made, but just very quickly, what is clear from these responses is that what is at the heart of economic planning and analysis are our systems of national accounting. And if these don't change, we keep on making these narrow type of analyses based on cost benefits that do not take into account ex ante our social and ecological concerns. So there is the challenge, I think. And second, I think the countries we are all working in do not really have a shortage of data, but there is not enough data that represents people who are, for one reason or the other, in the margin, and to bring in to feel them being represented in indicators and data on the economy and how the economy is faring is really important. So I would like to stress these 2 points. Thanks, Josh.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah. So we already talked a little bit about now measuring and how there have been different initiatives going on in Münster, in The Hague and Amsterdam, of trying also to connect with the civil society, basically the different citizen initiatives. And this has usually been referred to as a bottom-up approach, but there's also been a talk about top-down approaches. And looking to literature and the debates that are currently going on this topic, we see generally that both approaches or both strategies need to be there. It cannot be the one or the other. And I think we already talked a little bit about citizen initiatives and how to strengthen them. But what I want to stress here now as well, since also Michael talked about that it's a contentious topic, especially on the political level, because they basically have to adopt it. And Tobias has said there are certain strategies to make the politicians to adopt it and see a value in this. I want to now ask Catherine, because you're an expert in this field about political leadership, basically. How to place basically the goal of creating a well-being economy on the agenda of politicians, of governments. Now we're talking about city councils as well, and without making this subject a matter of elections and the outcome of elections.
Thanks, Joscha. I always get very nervous when someone refers to me as an expert, because I most certainly am not. I'm still, learning and on this journey, and so probably more questions than I have answers. So that's a big caveat to what I'm going to share with you. It's really delightful to be part of this panel, and really inspiring to see all the pieces of work that are bubbling up, and just great to be able to compare notes a little bit. So thank you very much for organising this conversation. I would say that the top down will be given more momentum than by the bottom up. And I think that point was made really nicely by Tobias, that we really need to show what's already happening, which then gives the political momentum. It's all too rare, sadly, to find a politician who is brave to step out without being able to point to what is already happening, unfortunately. And I think that's why we need to see the mutually reinforcing cycle of the sort of political regime with the niche level activity. I'd also say that being political is okay, as long as it's perhaps with a small p. And I think it was Aristotle who said that politics is the art of living together. And so I think it's all right to embrace the inherently political nature of this conversation. This is about, how do we take care of each other? How do we distribute what are ultimately, scarce resources? How do we make sure that everyone has enough? How do we equally make sure that maybe some people don't have too much? And that does take us into conversations that are small p politics. I'd also say let's embrace the inherently radical nature of these conversations. And apparently the original meaning of the word radical was about going to root causes. And I think, to me, that is one of the hallmarks of the wellbeing economy approach, is that it asks us to ask why, and not just be content to patch and repair and respond after the fact to the symptoms and the collateral damage of our current economic system, but dare to look upstream and say, what are the root causes? And so that is about being radical, and it is about being political. So embrace that. But it doesn't have to get stuck in party politics. And actually, if it does, we're going to be in real trouble, because then it becomes a political football. And I mean, I'm a student of democracy, but you all know politics changes, and you can tie yourself too closely to one political party and the next one comes in and you've lost all momentum. So it has to speak to all parties. And I'd also say it has to go beyond left and right. I think there is something for across the political spectrum, and we need to hold that space and be collaborative and collegial across parties. And I think perhaps the best way to do that, though I admit it's really hard, is holding firm to those questions around values and what are our common needs, and starting from the shared understanding there. And then we can perhaps have less heated debates about the practical translation. What sort of tools and instruments do we need to implement this? But start from the shared space that we can find. Get everyone around the table, because from there you can build dialogue and you can go further together. I also think it's really important to, as I was saying earlier, to help politicians to be bold. And that's where building the political demand really does matter. I used to work very closely with someone who used to be the environment minister in Scotland, and I hope she won't mind me telling you that she would go to international climate agreements and negotiations knowing she could push the envelope, because her sense was that the people of Scotland were up for it. She would go further because she had a sense that the zeitgeist, the momentum, the centre of gravity was really pushing her onwards. And I think that behoves all of us to build that sense of momentum and build that bravery amongst politicians, so and put more power to their elbow. And I'm in Glasgow, no more important than is that next week. So please shout very loudly from wherever you are to all the people who are coming to Glasgow for the COP. And I also think, and this is something that Michael was talking about, that politicians are quite hesitant to be the first mover. Some of them, if we're lucky, are almost racing to be second. And so many of the others have to be dragged kicking and screaming from the position of the laggards. But I think how we can partly get over that is through building those alliances and peer-to-peer support amongst different countries and different governments. And that's in a way the essence of the Wellbeing Economy Governments Partnership, is essentially a community of practice amongst civil servants from quite different countries, with different political makeup of their respective governments, but help them share what they're doing and also create almost a safe space where they can share their challenges and what's going on here and how did you solve that, and this is successful, how could we maybe translate that into our context. I'm really hoping that the Netherlands will in due course be able to join Scotland and New Zealand and Finland and Iceland and Wales and Canada as part of those conversations, not least because if you do, then we'll have 7 countries and we can call it the We 7 as a challenge to the G7. So please let's get the Netherlands involved there. And also, I think beyond just governments, it's that multi-sectoral alliance that's also really important. That's also why the Wellbeing Economy Alliance was created, is to really try to connect and amplify all the amazing work that's happening. Because as Frans and Evelyn pointed out, and as Tobias was saying, there is no shortage of inspirational projects here. We know what this looks like, but so often their activities are happening despite rather than because of the policy regime. So the more we can build momentum and amplify and point to that work and translate some of the lessons to change the sort of policy regime so it's more supportive, the more we'll be able to have that mutually reinforcing momentum. The one other point I wanted to share with you is that there are some very real fiscal benefits to getting this right. We published a paper just a few weeks ago trying to count the costs of the collateral damage of the current system, whether that was helping individuals survive and cope, or dealing with the fallout from climate-induced big weather events and topping up people's wages because the labour market is not providing them enough to live on and keep their family. And we tallied that up for Scotland and for Alberta. And in a way that I'll say it makes me a bit squeamish to do this, because it makes me uncomfortable to put dollar signs in front of this. So it's not the point, but it certainly proves that there is the possibility of doing this in a fiscally beneficial way. And it speaks to some audiences that may not be so comfortable with some of the sort of higher order values conversations. So the pragmatist in me thinks, let's just meet them where they are. And the fact these arguments maybe be a bit uncomfortable, it's a bit like making the business case for a wellbeing economy, doesn't mean that it's not a valid case to make. So let's get into those conversations and around those dialogue tables as much as possible. So I'll put the link to that report in the chat now. Thanks, Joscha.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was wonderfully said, I would say. It's really a call for cooperation between all the different parties to get everyone together. But lastly, before we also go into before we open the floor to the audience as well and to ask some questions and to join the discussion, I'd also want to ask last questions for the panel. So it's an open floor now. Basically, now we're starting from the assumption, and we talked about it, and I think we're all on the same page that our economic systems are to some degree failing us, and we are crying for alternatives, new economic models, new alternatives to think the economy as well. And you talked about it as well, like it's a matter of political contention. There are different parties talking about the issue and everyone has different agendas. So I want to ask the panel members, what has been your challenges so far? And where do you see basically this ideological competition, which is trying to fill the vacuum now? And who is this opposition? How do we challenge this opposition? How do we bring our own topics on the agenda that we all want to see? Frans, you wanted to answer to this, yeah?
Yeah, I very much agree with what Catherine said about the right-left divide, and that was a big obstacle for us in a way, because within the coalition there is a bit of right and left-wing divide. So what we try to do, but at the same time, we were very clear in, for example, in that the neoliberal policies were to be replaced by other policies. And what we did is focusing on what we call the democratization of the economy. So that's the bottom-up way we looked at it, moving ownership from, let's say, the big companies, the Ubers, the platform economy, Google, etc., the big steel companies, etc., those who determine the economy in the Amsterdam city and the region at the moment, towards, let's say, the organized citizens. And so that's the way we framed it, and not in left or right wing. but in democratization way. And we did this community wealth building pilot project in 3 neighborhoods, in which we worked with the organized groups in the neighborhoods to develop their own local economic vision and ideas and cooperative economy policies that they needed, and work from there bottom up towards this democratized economy, which essentially was the same as saying, well, we would like to have less power and less extraction by the big companies and the big chains and the big supermarkets, etc., in those neighborhoods. And because essentially what's happening in it's not only the very poor people in Amsterdam, but also the middle classes and their jobs that are being pushed out by these same policies. So to help strengthen them, we looked at it from this democratization angle.
Thank you very much, Franz. Is there anyone else who wants to respond to this? Yes, Evelyn.
I would like to say, well, there's a saying in the Netherlands, we use it often in our organization. When you go alone, you can go fast, but when you want to come somewhere, you go together. So we're in a new era where the problems are so complex in cities that you can't find solutions from one point of view. So you have to bring people to the table from different points of view. You need large companies, but also citizens in cooperations. And no one has the possibility to create a solution on their own. So I agree with what Catherine said, was just what I wrote down in answering this question. You have to come together and speak about your shared values, shared principles, and especially look for what future do you want. And when you have a common ground to talk on, then you can come to decisions. And as civil servants, well, you help citizens to come to that table. So that's how I see our role.
Thank you. Yes, Nicky, shortly.
I think this idea of community groups of citizens formulating their social vision on how they would like to see their society to function, and the economy is part of that. The economy is embedded in this social and political and built physical environment. Instead of doing ex post an assessment of impacts is very fertile. And I think if you start from that, you can formulate criteria, you can formulate boundaries or preconditions on how you would like the economy to function to the benefit of the well-being of the people. So it is flipping the coin in my perspective. And yeah, I'm grateful for this inspirational discussion on it.
Same. So before we now go over to the audience as well, I would like to ask Catherine to say a few closing words to sum up a little bit this event, what you basically already did before, and like motivated all of us to move together for this common cause, so to say. So yeah, I might leave you with the last words.
Okay, I'll be quick so that we have got a bit of time for dialogue with people.
Thank you.
But I think I just want to make 3 points. One is that we certainly have no reason to lack hope, because there is, despite the enormity of change that's required, and let's not kid ourselves of how much of a fundamental shift we need in our economic system, but it's not as if there are not a rich, diverse, creative, cheeky, energized, smart, passionate movement of people around the world and in the Netherlands, as you've heard, working on this. So we're not short of action that's happening. It might be disconnected. There might be little pockets and islands, and often those practices feeling pretty lonely and isolated, but there is change being made. And we're also certainly not short of the big vision. There's lots of people painting the vision, and there's lots of people bringing their ideas, whether it's donut economics and community wealth building and circular economy, about how we start making manifest some of that vision. So we've got that side of the equations happening. And as Michael said, we've got, and Nicky, I think as well said, you know, in a lot of countries like the ones that we're from, our colleagues in statistic offices largely have done their job. We're not short of counting some of the things. I mean, of course, we could always have more timely, better metrics, and as Nicky really importantly said, better disaggregated. But I don't think the excuse any longer is we don't have enough data. And we've got frameworks. Over half the OECD countries have multi-dimensional well-being frameworks. And we're starting to hear, as you know, Evelyn was explaining, people in the heart of governments grappling with how do you deal with these trade-offs, reaching for the sort of tools, experimenting. So that's where the hope, I think, comes from. But I think there is reality that some of that is being held back. And that's, as Michael was saying, that, you know, often we're lacking the tools for civil servants to grapple with some of these questions and deal with some of these trade-offs and think more long-term, think more upstream. This isn't about one single department. You know, these are civil servants need to work together like they've never done before. They need to share budgets. They need to deal with uncertainty and imprecision and long-term benefits rather than just short-term gain. And that is quite different to the microchip of a lot of the training that many of our colleagues in government have had. And so we need to help them break out of that. And really, because we need to start making those metrics matter. They need to add up to economic change. So the baton, I think, is being passed from our colleagues in statistics offices to policy entrepreneurs like Evelyn and like Franz, who are, you know, within government, who are trying to grapple with this and make it really matter. And then finally, just how do we, as I wrote down, Evelyn, we've got this parallel thing here. I wrote down, how do we go further faster? And that really is together. You know, it's about reaching out, not turning the back on people who have a slightly different perspective, building dialogues, because we've tried competition. We have tried one person saying my idea is better than the other. We have tried countries saying mine is bigger than yours. That is the GDP paradigm, that mindset. And let's not kid ourselves that such collaboration is really hard. It creates different emotional intelligence. It sometimes means decisions take longer. It sometimes means working with people that we might get criticized for sitting around the table with. So let's not pretend it's not difficult, but I think it's the only way we will deal with this challenge. And I'm really delighted to be part of all this movement with all of you. So thanks for all your work that you're bringing to this party of economic system change.
Oh, thank you so much for these last and inspiring words, Catherine. Now in the audience, does anyone have burning questions, remarks, their own ideas, opinions, strategies for going forward? Now is your time to speak up, and it would also be nice to switch on your camera altogether so we can have a whole load of people speaking and seeing each other. Maria.
Yeah, just quick question. Thank you it's very inspiring, everything that you do, and very important. Jan mentioned that they're already engaging some companies in the Netherlands into signing up for the principles. And because most of the focus, of course, for obvious reasons, is on policymakers and citizens. But the moment when large companies have budgets that are higher than state budgets these days, I was wondering if the well-being economy momentum is trying different strategies or ways to engage corporations into this dialogue without being co-opted. Of course, that's the big difficulty. So one obvious way is to say, let's just tax better, and then that's the solution for sure. But that is not happening. So whilst that is not happening, have you discussed in your debates what else can be done? Yeah.
Anyone keen on answering? Just jump in how you feel like.
Tobias, I think that was to you, but I'm happy to kick off by saying, I mean, I think this is, Maria, one of these things I grapple with is particularly publicly listed companies and the way stock markets work, and what are the perverse incentives, the reality of that stock market, how that puts pressure on ultimately extraction and the trade-off between paying a worker and extracting a dividend or return for shareholders, investing in environmental sustainability and extract. All these are very real trade-offs that the way governance systems of the stock market and then how that applies to the governance system of companies really operates. There's some interesting work being done by a group called Lang Kelly Chase here in the UK around just grappling with that inherent growth lock-in of the way the stock market operates. This is a question that I'm currently, if any researchers are out there looking for a PhD, this is the one to hold on to, and particularly given so many livelihoods post-retirement depend on stock markets via a lot of the pension system as well. I haven't got the answer, but just to say, this is an area we really need to keep thinking with about. But I think I'm really heartened by some quite radical thinking in the ESG community, where they're talking about going beyond financial returns. I mean, that's the sort of conversation we need. I think the people I speak to are probably massively outliers, but at least that conversation's starting. But Tobias will have much more to say on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I think this is one of the key ideas of the ECG, that you change the system rules, you change the law, you do the guides in a different way. We have at the moment, when you're an environmental friendly value-based company, you have high prices, your product is expensive, and you have limited possibilities to cut your costs. And the guy externalizing his costs on the society, this is the one guy with the cheap product. And we have to shift this. This is very easy. We also already, now we have rules and we have guides and we have law deciding whether you are allowed to build cars or to import products. We try to stop slavery or children work or something like this. We already have a law. We have different taxes. We just have to change the system to a systematic system oriented in the common good, and therefore the ESG has the common good product, which is is substituting the GDP. Exactly for this topic. So you can measure whether your politics is successful or is not. And you can, and when you do a new law, you can decide whether it is growing, there's a common good growing, or it is not. This is not, I think this is not the problem. And it is also not a question of the left or right party. We have several common good municipalities already, and 2 common good regions already. And it was always a conservative major, and it was a conservative city deciding that they do a balance sheet. We have a separate balance sheet and a separate matrix for cities, because they have different questions. And you can let the people decide about this. The ECG loves that the people decide bottom up. I did a convention here in Münster where we decided, we let the people decide about a development of the part of the city where they are living, and they felt that they have chances to see their values working in their part of the city. And they were able to decide. We had a budget and 3 years, and they met 6 times in conventions together, and they decided about the targets for their part of the city, and decided after this about the values and the projects we would establish in this part. So you don't have to wait for the politics, but the politics has the tools to, and the EU, you can't do this only in one country, but the EU is strong enough as one of the biggest markets in the world, is strong enough, and the EU is doing this already. The Green Deal is steps in this direction. We just have to and this is where we work on it with the ETG. You have to set up a rule set which is not destroyed by the lobbyism. This is very important. They have the big companies are working with a lot of lobby work against a strong rule set. You need a strong rule set, and you need it EU-wide. And you don't need the same rule set everywhere in the world. You don't need a perfect comparison between topics. You don't need a perfect measurement. That's not important. We have the ECG is in about more than 30 countries worldwide, and the problems in South America are completely different to our problems. Their view on economy is different. Their view on cooperatives and their experiences with cooperatives is different to ours. So they need different rule sets. But this is not a problem. The point is not to fulfill a perfect measurement with a common currency of impact. I'm not on the line with Michael at this point. The most important point is to have the same target, to understand that you have to do it based on values, not based on money. And then it's not important which step you choose or whether the measurement is perfect. The measurement of GRI is perfect, but it has no momentum because they are perfect in bean counting. They know every size of every bean at every color. They can measure this perfectly, but they don't do any transmission. They don't do any transformation in the companies because they made a CRI unit, and the CRI unit is perfect in measuring beans, but they don't think about values, and they don't think about targets, and they don't think about change.
Without going into what you just said was very interesting. It's I just see it's already 1:06. So officially the event today is over. I want to thank everyone, especially to our panelists and also the audience, for making it today, to joining in for a very inspiring discussion. I really liked it. It was a lot of fun as well. So thank you very much.
On behalf of the Center for Urban Studies at the University of Amsterdam, and Jules and I would like to thank you for a wonderful and very inspiring panel. We really hope we will host more of debates from this group and follow up, because there's a big constituency wishing to follow what you're doing. So thank you very much.